Hello Polkadot, my name's Chris Wilson, and in this tutorial, we are going to connect to a Polkadot node hosted by Datahub using an RPC provider. We are going to build a few simple Node.js applications which will serve as practical tools to develop further understanding of using Polkadot and other substrate-based blockchains. In each tutorial, we will cover a different aspect of interacting with Polkadot, from simply connecting to a node to staking tokens, all the way through to searching historical block data for specific transactions with Datahub. Polkadot has built a JavaScript library to help developers easily interface with its API. The documentation for Polkadot.js can be found at polkadot.js.org/docs. Let's go ahead and go on over to datahub.figment.io, sign into our account, add the Polkadot protocol, and scroll all the way down. And we will come to step 1 in the tutorials. You'll click Start, and that will open up step 1 for us. Node.js. The Polkadot pathway requires at least node version 12.x of Node.js. Anything above 12 will work. We encourage developers to use a version manager to easily switch between different Node.js engine versions without having to worry about breaking any of their existing projects or development setups. We recommend Node Version Manager, or NVM. Once you've installed Node, verify it's 12.x. So in order to set up our environment, I'm using Windows, and I like to use Linux on Windows and have the full resources of my system available instead of using partitions or a second drive, a bootable drive. We have here is how to download and install Docker desktop for Windows, and this is a nice tutorial. You can go here to find that tutorial, and that'll get you all set up with Windows. And then you can come over here. If you're on Windows, you'll need NVM for Windows by Corey Butler on GitHub, and you'll go down here on the side to Releases, and then you'll scroll down and you'll click this one. This is the one you want to install for Node Version Manager. And then you can go back to the front here, and they have all of the commands and how to switch between versions. If you don't want to use a Node Version Manager, you'll need to go to Node.js and download the relevant Node version. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, we can go ahead and jump straight into this. We can open up Ubuntu and run node-v, and we can see that we do have the minimum required node. All right. Now, for project setup, it's a good idea to keep a separate directory for all our project directories or clone code repos. This directory might be named projects or repos, or anything that will assist us in staying organized. The point is to know which directory we are working in for the duration of this pathway. Linux users can make this directory inside of their home directory, located at home/username, or on many distributions, for example, Home Alice Projects. Windows users should consider making a new folder within their user directory, located at C users username, for example, users Alice Projects. The first step is to create a directory for our project where we will initialize it as a Node.js project with a package.json. So in the terminal, we're going to run, this is make directory, and that's going to make a directory for Polkadot named Polkadot. And then we will go change directory, cd, into directory that we just created, Polkadot. And then mp init flagged -y is going to initialize the package.json file and create a file. So let's go ahead and do that now. We can start by opening up Ubuntu. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you're also going to want Visual Studio Code, a code editor of some kind. This is the one that I prefer to use. You can use it too. It makes it real easy to modify and work inside of a directory. All right, so open up Ubuntu. We're going to go mk make dir directory, and then we can name it. So I'm going to call this one poke. Let's call it poke. And then we're going to go cd poke. And now we're in poke. And then we can go code and then period. And now this should open up Poke inside Visual Studio Code. And there we are. Now that we have Visual Studio Code open, we can go up here to Terminal, and we're going to click on New Terminal, and that's going to give us our output terminal right here. Over here is where all of our files are going to live. So now that we're in here, we can just double check, make sure our node version is accurate. There we go. Now we can run this bit of code, np-init-y, to initialize the package.json file. So here we go, np-init-y, enter, bam, there it is. Now here's our package.json file. It's got all that in there. Awesome, awesome. So each key value pair in this JSON file tells Node.js something about our project. Minus the scripts and dependency section, this is the minimum amount of information that Node.js requires in order to run an application from a package.json. Installing packages. Now that we have our Node.js application set up, we can install the required dependencies. Those are going to be our .env for storing environmental variables and other sensitive information, Axios for sending JSON RPC via HTTPS. This will be covered in the transaction search tutorial. And we're also going to need @Polkadot/API for interacting with the Polkadot API. We can install these packages with a single line of code, which is really neat. Now remember, this $sign is if you're using Linux. See how it has a $sign right there? So we're not going to want to include that $sign. So we're going to want that. We can go ahead and go into here and run that. And that's going to take a couple of minutes to download. And once it's downloaded, we're going to see this added to our package.json file. And we're also going to see a package lock JSON made. And there we go. We see all that done. Beautiful. So now we can go into storing the Datahub API key. Next, we want to create a .env file at the root of the directory. This will hold all of our sensitive data as we build our application. The .env file should be kept safe as it is designed to hold sensitive information such as Datahub API access key and mnemonic seed phrases. We should never check out this file to a Git repository. To prevent this from happening, we must make sure to create a .gitignore file in the root of our project directory and add file name .env to it. Make sure then to save the .gitignore file to disk. As the name implies, this will instruct Git to leave our .env file alone. The consequences of failing to properly secure sensitive data tend to be severe. So as developers, we must take all available precautions to safeguard this data. So what I like to do first is I like to make the gitignore file first and then populate the .env file. So we're going to go gitignore. So now inside of our .gitignore file, we're going to put .env, and then we're going to Control S and save that file. Now we can go ahead and make our .env file. And inside of our environmental file, we're going to go ahead and put in this part. And save it. And then right here, carets included, we're going to remove that. We're going to replace that with our API key. We can find our API key by going back to our data hub and then click this right here. Now you never, ever, 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 ever want to share your API key with anybody. So don't post it on Discord. Don't include it in a screenshot. Don't do anything like that. If somebody has your API key, they own your application. They own everything. They can access it all. So do not share this, all right? And it looks like this. This is only for demo purposes. So do not do what I'm doing, all right? So let's go ahead and copy that over here with the, make sure there's no carets there, and we're going to paste that in. Then we're going to save it again. So now we're going to be able to connect to the node using this account. So let's go back to the tutorial. So we replaced API key, included the carets, with a valid Datahub API key. To obtain a valid API key, I just showed you how to do that. We'll be able to copy a unique API key from the dashboard. All right, yep, it's blurred out for your safety. So now we can interact with the Polkadot node. Now that we have completed all the necessary configuration steps, we can start building our application. Start by requiring or importing the packages we have installed. Then demonstrate everything is working properly by connecting the API and requesting a timestamp. There are a few different concepts at work in this code, so let's break it down for better understanding. We can start by creating a connect.js file. So in here, we'll click the little create file, connect.js. Inside here, we want to put this bit of code. And we can do so like this and save. All right, and now we have our connect file. Make sure you save this file to disk after pasting in the code in your text editor or IED integrated development environment. We can now examine the code line by line. We can see here on line 1, 2, and 3, both the API promise and the HTTP provider work together to allow sending requests using HTTP to an HTTP RPC server. This method does not support subscriptions, so we won't be able to listen to events such as new blocks or balance changes. If such functionality is required, using the WebSocket provider will be your first stop. Implementing it is functionally very similar to using the HTTP provider, except we would need to require a WS provider from @polkadot/API and instantiate it with new WS provider. For the purposes of this pathway, we will be using the HTTP provider in every step. Next, we load the Polkadot Node client configuration from environmental variables created during our initial setup, calling the .config method of .env on the require function this way. With no parameters, we'll load from .env by default. We use this dependency for convenience and separation of concerns. Instead of hard-coding values directly into our application, which is an anti-pattern and should be avoided when possible, it also allows us to define the variables once in .env and use them in every file. Moving along, we will examine the contents of our main function. We begin with main function using an anonymous function declaration as fat arrow syntax. This may be unusual compared to the more common method of opening a main function such as async main. The outcome is the same in that we can refer to main to execute the function body. Either approach will work here. It is largely up to the choice of the developer. The async keyword enables us to get promises as the result of the await keyword. Pass the HTTP provider to API promise.create inside of a JSON object. This is all the code which is required to configure a connection to the Polkadot API. It will set up both the HTTP provider with a connection to the Polkadot RPC endpoint and instantiate a new API promise which will reference everywhere in our code with API. This keeps everything clean, readable, and simple to understand. In the remainder of the pathway, we will use the same pattern for setting up the HTTP provider, API, and defining our main function, so remember it well. We construct our API requests by method chaining, and all we are going to do right now is query the API for a timestamp. One last thing. We need to actually call our main function so that it executes. We will use .catch and a callback with arrow function expression to pass any errors that we get generated into console.error. There should not be any, as none of the code with our main function is going to fail. However, if the Datahub URL in env is malformed or the API key is missing, an error most definitely will occur. Let us run the program using Node.js. To see the result of our timestamp query, double-check the contents of the local file for errors or omissions, ensure it is saved to disk, and then run the file with the following command, node connect.js. I believe we did everything properly. Let's verify. And there's our timestamp. Nice. All right, we'll see a similar output, which is true. That's very similar to what we got. The first line is logging coming directly from the API init module, which is informing us that the API will only be available in a limited mode because the HTTP provider does not support subscriptions. Using WebSocket Provider for subscriptions may be covered in future advanced pathways. The following line is the timestamp which we requested via the API query method in our program. This concludes the first step in understanding how to connect to Polkadot via Datahub Node using the Polkadot JavaScript API. Now, before continuing to the next step, let's go back to our Datahub and let's click Verify on step 1. All right, verification was scheduled. Usually takes around 5 minutes, can take up upwards. And when it does come through, you'll see your query pop up right here. And there it is, verified. Congratulations! In this tutorial, we learned how to use environmental variables to keep sensitive information out of our code, and also how to connect to the Polkadot API using an RPC provider. We successfully connected to a Datahub hosted Polkadot node and performed an API query to the node using a simple method chain. Stand up, stretch, get a drink of water, take a few deep breaths, give yourself a pat on the back for learning something new. Then get ready for the next step. In the next tutorial, we'll be creating our first Polkadot account on the West End testnet and funding it with WND by connecting to a chat room which hosts a faucet, a means for us to request free tokens. We also have our own faucet, by the way, so you don't necessarily have to go through the chat room one. If you had any difficulties following this tutorial or simply want to discuss Polkadot with us, you can join our community forums or our Discord community today for up-to-date news and events. As always, if you had any difficulties with this tutorial or simply want to discuss Datahub or Polkadot, you can join our community forums or our Discord in the link down below. I look forward to seeing you there, and until next time, happy coding.